claim to be the victims of racism. However, are we harboring our own racist attitudes towards non-Asians and towards each other? Racism, coming up next. Hi, I'm Sanyya Gardez. Welcome to Broken Silence. The issue at hand today is racism. Asians started immigrating to the UK over half a century ago, but the issue of racism is still as relevant today. How much progress have we really made, and how much further do we still have to go? Joining me now is Amr Bashir. Amr, can you just tell me a little bit about what you do?
Yes, my work currently at the moment, I work for a council, and one of the aims is to eliminate things like racism, sexism, disabilityism, all the different strands to
What's
ensure
your role at the council?
to promote equality
Okay.
in general.
So you work across with different organizations, or?
Yes, across different groups, community groups, voluntary sector groups, a wide range of audience really.
Well, Asians have been here for about 50 years or so.
Yep.
Why is there still a need for a quality and diversity officer?
I suppose one of those things is that there are still pockets of ignorance out there, and we need to ensure that we reach out to them, we can inform them. I suppose also to find out what the views are of different communities, whether it's African Caribbean, Asian, Chinese.
What are their views?
Well, it depends what the topic is, really.
In terms of, just say, issues of employment?
Issues of employment, again, some communities, Chinese community, the Indian communities, they have different fields of work that they go into, whether it's medicine, whether it's, I know in terms of Chinese communities, it's a different employment, whereas maybe with Pakistani communities, it's takeaways, it's taxi drivers, so more self-employed in those respects.
In your experience, do you think that it's a lack of integration on the part of our community that's leading to this kind of racial divide?
I wouldn't say that, because how else would you form a community? If we were sporadic throughout the country, then we wouldn't be a community, we would just be individuals.
But the South Asian community in the UK is not a small minority. You don't really need to have labeled organizations primarily for, say, the Pakistani community, the Bangladeshi community, the Indian community. There's enough of us here in the UK that we don't need to segregate ourselves even more.
I'd argue that, because, yes, if you live in London, if you live in Birmingham or Leicester, yes, there are large communities making up maybe 40–50% of the population, but then you move outside those big cities, then there aren't that many. Ethnic minorities make up about 10% of the population. So I think that's why we need to cluster together. And communities develop around places of worship, food outlets, things of that nature, and that's why we do huddle together. And I suppose it's also safety in numbers. That's why we group together.
I mean, I've come from America, where it's, obviously it's a huge country and the community is completely spread out.
Yeah.
Now, I was in a school where I was primarily the only Asian. So it forced me to integrate with the society that I was part of.
Yeah.
But I find that in the UK, you don't necessarily have to do that. You can spend your whole life living here and not actually have to learn the language.
I would disagree on that part. Firstly, I don't believe you can have forced integration. Integration is something that has to happen out the will of two people, two communities. In terms of language, it's one of those things, people learn the language, people need to have an opportunity. So newer communities, they arrive here and they need mechanisms to actually learn the language, whether it's ESOL classes or whether it's just community centres. The South Asian population, we're third, fourth, maybe even fifth generation in the UK, and we've brought up here, we've been through the schooling, and so we know the language isn't a problem for us, whereas newer communities, they need that opportunity to develop and to educate themselves.
Amar, your role as an equality and diversity officer, what kind of problems and issues do you encounter on a regular basis?
Well, I've dealt with, in my previous role, I've dealt with racial harassment, where victims have suffered, whether it's at the school, whether it's at the hands of the police, whether it's at the hands of just on the street. So they face racism, racial harassment, they come to us, and then I provide caseworker support, try bringing other agencies, find out what resolution they want.
What can we do as a community to promote more tolerance and acceptance?
First of all, I think that word tolerance is a horrible word. I don't like that word tolerance for...
Explain. Do explain.
The reason why is that if you tolerate something, you have power over that individual. So you can either crush that individual or you can accept that individual. Whereas if you want to create, a harmonious society, everybody's got to be equal.
Well, tolerance just really suggests that you kind of agree to disagree. You don't have to agree with what the other person is saying, but you'll tolerate them.
Yeah.
So I think that within our own community, if you look in cities like Birmingham and London,
Yeah.
there's these ghettos, these isolated pockets where there are just primarily an Asian community, and non-Asians going into that community actually feel uncomfortable, like they're in a foreign land.
Yeah, but why are they ghettos in the first place is a question that needs to be answered. Is it because, like you said, segregation? Is it because the council have ignored them? What is the fundamental reason for
Well,
ghettos to occur?
what do you think it is?
I think communities have been ignored. I think, like you said, and we've been here for about 50, 60 odd years. When we first arrived here, it was like, okay, go to the nastiest housing maybe.
But why are we still there? If this is an issue that started 50, 60 years ago, why are we still stuck there?
We've got to work ourselves out of the ghetto. And that happens through education, entrepreneurship, and gradually you are seeing more educated Asians, more affluent Asians. You see, Asians on the millionaires list in the UK. So we are moving our way up, but it's a gradual process. You can't snap your fingers and then go from a ghetto.
Yeah, I understand it can't happen overnight. But do you think that the people that are living in those communities, in those those pockets where it's primarily Pakistani or whether it's primarily Sikhs, do you find that they are harboring racism in the sense that they're racist against non-Asians? So they're not only that the society has done them wrong, council has done them wrong, they are now choosing to stay there. So are they, in a sense, being racist against non-Asians then?
Well, you have to ask them. I'm not going to speak on their behalf, but they want to live in that community because that's where their mosques are, where their gurdwaras are. That's where their whether it's their food outlets, whether it's halal, whether it's takeaways. It's certain things have to be in place in order for a community to bind together and stay in that role.
Do you think a real progress would be when there won't be a need for an equality and diversity officer, when there will be when organizations and companies will realize that we just need to have diverse people working there, we need to have equality within our organization. So do you think once your job is obsolete, that's when there's going to be real progress?
I think so, yes, because I suppose we're still at that stage of promoting equality. I suppose, again, it was the words, but like you mentioned, tolerant. I don't like the word ethnic minority because what's ethnic about me? What's ethnic about my daughter? What's ethnic about me to call me an ethnic minority in this country?
Well, how else would you describe yourself then?
I'm just a minority group.
Okay.
Well, the same as whether it's a person with a disability, whether it's somebody who's gay or bisexual, whether it's somebody of a certain faith, it's a minority group. But there's nothing ethnic about me. And until people stop referring to me as ethnic, then I'll know that I'm part of mainstream society.
And so do you think it's because we're getting pigeonholed into that ethnic minority group that it's creating that kind of diversion?
It is.